right, let's just jump into it. Little game that you and I have played with all the different position groups, especially in this draft class because there's a lot of really loaded ones. Who do we like more? Who do we like less? Who's our favorite to watch? And who's the best fit? But this time, we'll do it with all the free agent quarterbacks. There's more free agent quarterbacks this year than most years. Just off the top of my head that I wrote down, Tom Brady, Phil Rivers, Teddy, Jameis, Mariota, maybe Derek Carr, probably Andy Dalton, maybe Cam Newton. It's a lot of names, a lot of Pro Bowls, a lot of All-Pros, a lot of Super Bowls on that list. For me, who I like more than maybe a lot of other people in that group is Derek Carr, and the caveat that it's got to be in the right system. Kind of what they were doing with Oakland, I think, was almost like a best-case scenario for him. It's a lot of run the ball, a lot of quick game, a lot of play action, let him get the ball out. Don't really make him susceptible to pressure. I think, unfortunately, with him, the Raiders' defense, it kind of put him in bad positions last year where he had to try to come back. Now you're running more 5-step, more 7-step. And I think when the plays take longer to develop, he almost gets into his own head. He's not as good under pressure. Really, he thrives in that quick, get it out, run the ball kind of system. I think if you put him in an offense, who knows, maybe he'll stay in Oakland. If you put him in an offense that caters to that skill set, he's fine. I think he's a very viable starting quarterback, an upgrade for probably several teams. Maybe he isn't the guy, but if you have a really solid roster around him and a coach that knows what he can and can't do, you can win a lot of games with Derek Carr.
Yeah, if you understand his limitations and keep him out of full field reads that last 3 seconds or more,
can't do it.
Ask him to move. Or you're just developing an offensive roster. You have a bad offensive line. You don't have a ton of really good skill position players around him. He'll be okay, but he's not going to thrive. Is he ever going to be that top 10 guy that's going to sort of be the lever and get you over the hump, win you a bunch of games when you're 10 points down late in the game? He's probably not, but that's okay. It's still an upgrade for a lot of teams.
Yeah, a lot of desperate teams. Who's yours, by the way?
Andy Dalton is mine because people forget about the good Andy Dalton when, again, much like you were talking about with Carr, the Bengals had built a roster with great skill position players around them. The offensive line was solid. Bill Lazor was his offensive coordinator. Those were humming offenses. Those teams won a lot of games, scored a lot of points. Dalton was the trigger man. He occasionally made the big throw, but again, they didn't put it on his shoulders to do all that late. Again, get him in an offense where he's making his quick decisions 3 seconds and under, not a ton of deep drops. Get him some decent protection, at least up the middle, and you can win a lot of games with Andy Dalton.
People forget they were an undefeated team in the first week of December. In his best year, he got hurt. They fell apart. But when they had Green, when they had Eifert, they had a good running back duo. The offensive line was fine. Like, again, he wasn't carrying the team, but he certainly was not slowing them down or limiting them. Like, I think he's almost like the new Alex Smith, where it's like, man, you plug him in, as long as your roster's fine, you're going to win a ton of games. So
yeah,
I'd say totally agreement.
I'd say Alex Smith with a little bit more arm talent.
Yeah,
that's a pretty good mix.
Yeah, I mean, the Dalton line was the Dalton line for a reason, so I'm right there with you. I would say in terms of who I like less than a lot of other people, it would probably be Marcus Mariota, and I think people get a little bit starry-eyed when they remember Mariota at Oregon, but also remember that system at Oregon kind of protected him from himself a little bit. A lot of running, a lot of play action, a lot of quick game. There wasn't a whole lot of we're dropping 5-7 steps. We're asking you to make 3 progressions while avoiding pressure. Like, there wasn't a whole lot of that. And that's fine. A lot of the NFL is that today. So there are systems that he fits well, but we see there was a couple years ago when they played the Ravens where they were just throwing blitz after blitz after blitz at him. They were compressing the pocket and saying, Marcus, we're giving you one-on-ones outside, go beat us. Couldn't do it. I think under pressure, he really struggles. I think in anything where he's not getting the ball out in less than 2.5 seconds, he struggles. I think the mobility isn't quite, maybe by today's standards, what we think of a mobile quarterback. He's not really as creative as a runner as some of the other guys that we see. Obviously, Lamar, even Dak. Like, there's a lot of guys that I consider to be better runners than him, despite his athletic gifts. The arm talent isn't crazy. So, again, it's almost similar to Carr, but I think people perceive Carr different than they perceive Mariota when they're pretty much the same guy. Like, as a passer, they're pretty much the same guy. And so I would say I'm lower on Mariota than the general consensus of him, just for that reason. Again, he's fine, but he's not the guy.
Yeah, I think he's a great number 2, and I'm glad you brought the Carr point up, because as we talk through this scenario, it's like, that's the same thing we just said. Get the ball out in 2 seconds. He was really good at that at Oregon. Distribute to the playmakers. He can pick up yards with his feet. He's not going to make yards with his feet. Yes. And that makes him sort of an ideal number 2, where you don't have to put the pressure on him. You get a little bit of his mental state back. I think he's a little bit rattled. The physical skills are still there. Again, not a great arm, but plenty arm to make the throws. Mobility, sure, better than average, I'd say. And surround him with some talent. Make sure the line's decent. Get the quick game going. 2.5 seconds. 2 tops, 3 reads. Not 5 and 7 step drops. And you can get a lot out of Marcus Mariota, even if he's your number 2. So I'm lower on him, I guess, as probably primary starter. A guy that's going to go win you games, but he has some value. So
I think if I was going to evaluate, like, I would put Carr and Mariota right next to each other in terms of valuation as passers. It's just one of them is perceived to be a lot worse than the other, and I don't think they're that far apart. I think they're almost the same thing.
Yeah, 2A, 2B kind of thing.
Which is fine. It's just we have to be realistic about what they are.
Absolutely. Guy I'm lower on, Phillip Rivers. And Phillip Rivers really started to show the physical wear at the end of last year. Protection broke down a little bit. He's not as mobile as he used to be. The picks really piled up, and that's going to worry a lot of people. Ball security was a thing. And I think he's kind of at the end of his rope physically. We started to see that. Mentally sharp as ever, Phillip Rivers is going to understand the game as well as any quarterback. And the only system I think I would drop him into and feel good about it, Indy.
Ooh.
You put him with Frank Reich. You put him with a great, solid interior offensive line that gives him a bunch of protection. He's got a bunch of young playmakers. He's in a dome.
He would love Nyheim Hines. He would adore him.
Right? And I think that's a situation where Phillip Rivers has a bunch of value, but I think it's kind of the only one. And even so, just for about a year. So I'm lower on a lot of...
The mind is still there, the arm isn't. You know, you can almost see when he was taking all those deep shots and getting picked last year, it's like he knew, like, okay, 28, 29-year-old Phillip Rivers, that's money. You know, 2009 Phillip Rivers, that is money. And he's like, oh, I can make that throw. But it's like, well, maybe not now. Which is, it's unfortunate because Phillip Rivers is one of my favorite quarterbacks the last 15 years. Like, I love Phillip Rivers. But not every quarterback is Tom Brady that can play till he's 40 and not really lose any gas on the ball. He certainly did. So I'm right there with you. I think he would be a phenomenal mentor for a young quarterback that Indy brought in, or even if they're really convinced that Brissett's going to be a long-term guy. I think Rivers maybe can take over as a starter, have Brissett take a back seat again, and maybe try to learn something behind him. But I think he's also, I think, a good teacher. I think he'd be a good mentor for a young guy, too. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Lower on him as a player, but as a mentor, very high on him. Favorite to watch, I think you and I are probably in agreement, at least out of this group, who's the guy you put on before bed that makes you giddy. Healthy Cam Newton, I would take over all but probably 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the league. He is so fun to watch. The mobility is still there. The physicality is still there. The health isn't, obviously, partially because of the physicality, but people don't give him enough credit for how smart he is. He's really good at the line of scrimmage, especially when he spreads defenses out, and he's like, I'm picking on you, that's my matchup. He's such a good quarterback. The MVP season was not a fluke. Like, there still is that Cam Newton in there somewhere. He just has to get healthy.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot harder to pry out. You and I are aligned on this, and healthy is the word, right? If all the gifts are there, and he can unite those with the things he does at the line of scrimmage, with his motion, with running people over at 260-ish pounds, all those things together make a brilliant player. A lot of people are thinking peak Cam Newton is the Cam Newton they're going to get if they sign him this year, and I'm not so sure that's the case. So
it's a maybe.
You're gonna get some of that, probably not all of that, and that's still pretty darn good because that high was extremely high. So if he's healthy and he's aligned and he goes to a place, if they let him go and he goes to a place that's got some exciting young playmakers, come on, Cam in San Diego.
Right. Cam with Keenan Allen, Williams. Let's just assume they bring Henry back, Eckler. That might be the best group of weapons ever that he's had
and
to
I've
work
seen
with.
a couple of mock drafts that have had San Diego investing heavily in the interior offensive line and a tackle. Sorry.
LA.
Oh,
I know, we still do. 3 years later, we still do it.
You're moving. Yeah, the LA Chargers, so hard to say. But if LA does that, right, if they beef up the offensive line, and there's a bunch of offensive line talent in the draft this year, and you bring in Cam as the trigger man for those weapons, if nothing else, it would be a lot of fun to watch. That's a popcorn viewing session every Sunday.
I think it was Joe Marino's mock that came out recently, had them getting Wirfs in a trade down, still getting Wirfs from Iowa, excellent tackle prospect, and Lloyd Cushenberry.
Yeah, that's
one of our favorite center by a mile in this class. You put Cushenberry, Wirfs, Cam, all those weapons. I dare you to stop them.
That's must-see TV.
Oh yeah, that's a primetime game against the Chiefs for the over/under 60 points. Like easy money, love it. So I think we're both all in on healthy Cam. It's just knowing whether or not he's going to be healthy, and that's a doctor's thing. We won't know it until September, to be quite honest.
No, and quite frankly, November.
Right? Yeah, you're probably right.
Guys that have, like Rivers, who've got some mileage on them, they can look really good in September. They can look pretty good in October. The longer they go, I'm thinking about late career like Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
Right? First 2 months, he could hide it. Last 2 months, there was nothing left in the arm. He's floating up balls that high school quarterbacks would throw. It's just, the gas runs out. It's a long season. It's still a physical game. It's tough.
Look at Drew Brees' splits in his first 350 attempts and then everything after that, and it is two different guys.
Yeah, drops off the plateau for sure.
Completely off. So I'm right there with you. Best fit, we've already talked about him. Now, you're a Bears fan. I consider the Bears to be my NFC team, so I think we're both emotionally invested in this.
I am.
And a lot of Bears fans, I think, might be upset by it, but they shouldn't be. Andy Dalton to Chicago.
It's a natural fit. I think it's the best fit. Bill Lazor's got brought in as the offensive coordinator. He and Dalton have made magic before. Dalton is a pro. The Bears have a lot of good weapons. People forget this because 2019 was such a, let's just call it what it was, a tragedy. There's a lot of talent there. The receiver core is very solid. David Montgomery is sort of a giant in waiting. Again, just like San Diego, if they bring in some line talent to beef up the inside, patch up that right guard, everybody sort of rebounds to form. They have Juan Castillo there doing their offensive line now. Like, there's a lot of things in place that sort of point towards Bears rebound. And if they get even average play out of Andy Dalton, that's so much better than what they got out of the quarterback spot in 2019. The Bears could bounce back very strongly on offense, and that defense will absolutely eat if they are ahead in games.
Especially if Akeem's healthy.
Yeah.
Because, he's, like you said, he's the straw that stirs the drink. When Akeem's healthy, that defense is not just elite, it's historically elite.
Yeah.
And I'm right there with you. I think you get Dalton for reasonable money, whatever reasonable money is these days, because it seems to be going up and up and up. You get him for reasonable money. You use one of those second-round picks on potentially a tight end, or even you move down and you're in this deep wide receiver class, because they still could use some receiver depth. Whether it's Denzel Mims, which is a pipe dream, I know, but some people have him sliding that far. You get Denzel Mims. Maybe you move down in the third. KJ Hamler's sitting there, who we're going to maybe talk about probably more than a lot of other receivers in this class over the next couple of months.
Probably.
You get a little bit extra talent for Dalton to work with, that he can just play point guard and distribute. You get one more guy on the interior you can plug in, and all of a sudden, it's going to sound crazy to say, the Bears are a top 5 roster in the league.
I don't think it's crazy to say. They really underperformed based on their talent, and a lot of that was they couldn't get the ball to those people. Now, people will blame Nagy, people will blame Mitch. I get it. That debate has been kicked to death. If you get average play from the quarterback spot, I think even if you get average results from a very talented offense,
it's still an upgrade.
And your defense is top 5, that's the kind of team that can easily roll into the playoffs and then watch what happens.
And who wants to play in Soldier Field in December against that defense?
Nobody in their right mind.
Nobody.
Not if they're
nobody.
Healthy. Yeah.
Oh.
So my fit's a little bit different. I wanted to go out of the box. We've seen a lot of these people, a lot of the quarterbacks mocked to different places. One I thought of, we talked about it right before we started recording, that just sort of seems like it might work. And I don't think it's where the organization is, but Carolina with Matt Rule, brand new coach coming in. He's got a long contract. They could just go as is this year and lose. That's what he did at Baylor. And sort of people are talking about tank for maybe an in-state quarterback that might be coming out next year. That's one strategy, right? But another thing they could do, because they do have a little bit of money, and if they move Cam, is go get Teddy Bridgewater, right? Now Teddy with Christian. Teddy showed that with a good roster in the Saints organization. Look, he rolled off 5 wins. And Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. They have a pretty good offensive line. Right, that doesn't sound that different from where the Panthers are, right? With maybe even some upgraded weapons. I mean, CMC and Kamara, like, okay.
Yeah.
2 apples off the same tree, so.
And I would argue McCaffrey's better.
I would be willing to put a stake in the ground for that. But Teddy distributing the ball, doing what he does, being in general, making the smart plays. Again, a little bit mobile. The arm's not tremendous, but he can get it. He's proven that he can get the ball out there to places where playmakers can make plays. Carolina's got some. Again, referencing Joe Marino's mock draft from the Draft Network. If you're not following Joe, you should. Did a great mock draft, and Carolina traded down a couple times, picked up playmakers like crazy because the wide receivers are available. There's a bunch of tight ends out there. You do that and put Teddy as the trigger man, like Carolina is a different team in the NFC South.
Well, we talk about Teddy as a point guard. Get it out quick, find space against zone, or if it's against man, he's smart enough that he can recognize. And he's always, in Carolina, especially with Matt Rule, who's both an offensive and a defensive coach, so he really understands both sides of the ball. But when you watch Baylor's offense, I mean, there was a lot of like double calls where it's like, hey, if you get zone, do this. If you get man, kill to that. And Mims killed people with that because, again, he can kind of do anything. But I think you get Teddy in a system where he has some control at the line of scrimmage, where he's got a whole lot of speed to work with, some mismatch options to work with in man, in Moore, in McCaffrey. But also against zone, if you're just boom, out, boom, out, boom, out, they have yak threats all over the place. Moore's a good yak threat. Samuel, obviously McCaffrey. That tight end they drafted out of Indiana a couple of years ago, who's like a 4-6 flat kind of guy. Like, just let him distribute, get it out in under 2.5 seconds. The line isn't great, but if the ball's getting out that quick, it almost doesn't even matter. That can work, and it can work well.
Yeah, they could do a lot in the sort of 7 to 10 yard range.
Yeah, they'll kill people.
Super quick balls coming out in a second and a half, and then people say, oh, well, everybody's just going to sit on that, right? They're going to compress it. Do it. I dare you, because you're going to go Caffrey on wheel, Samuel off and just go on the other side.
More on those stutter goes that he's really good at.
Go ahead, sit on that. I dare you. Yeah. And Teddy will make you pay. He'll hit it. Right, it'll be a looper, but if you do that for 2 quarters, and the defensive coach says that's it, we're going in, we're done, right? We're gonna press everything. I dare you, because they'll go right over the top. So I think Teddy would be an interesting option. I don't think it's gonna happen. I just don't think that's where the organization is aligned right now. They're not looking for a big money stopgap. They're looking for a long-term answer at the position, which Teddy would love, but I don't think they're ready to pay for that. So I don't think it's likely to happen, but it's more of a what if, and imagine if it did, what would it look like? And boy, that's a fit I'd be excited about.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. So this has been a fun game. I like doing this kind of 4 up, 4 down kind of format for different position groups. Obviously, there's a lot more to talk about in free agency other than the quarterbacks. Trust me, we're going to get to it. We got a month. But I'm really excited about this. Again, Carr, Mariota, Cam, Dalton, the older guys, Brady, Phil. We didn't even talk about Tom Brady. We'll probably talk about him a lot. A lot of options to choose from, in addition to being a deep quarterback class. For a lot of quarterback-needy teams like, cough, cough, the Chicago Bears, there's really no excuse not to come out with a quarterback from this offseason. So excited to see where these guys go. Thank you guys for watching. Check out the pod in the description, the Bootleg Football Podcast. Tons more content like this coming. We'll see you soon.